The dust from the stagecoach had barely settled when Beatrice Morgan stepped down onto the main street of Chico, California, her worn traveling dress clinging to her in the summer heat of 1878. She knew what awaited her here would be no different from what she had left behind in Sacramento, but at least in this smaller town, she might find work that would allow her to survive without depending on anyone ever again. The whispers started before she even reached the boarding house. Two women standing outside the general store turned their backs as she passed, their voices dropping to conspiratorial murmurs that were somehow louder than if they had spoken at full volume. Beatrice kept her chin up and her eyes forward, the way she had learned to do over the past year since her divorce had become final. The scandal of it had followed her like a shadow, darker and more persistent than any physical thing could be. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, looked her up and down with barely concealed disapproval when Beatrice inquired about a room. "We are a respectable establishment," the older woman said, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I will need references." "I have a letter from Reverend Patterson in Sacramento," Beatrice said quietly, pulling the folded paper from her reticule. "And one from Mrs. Gerald Thompson, for whom I worked as a seamstress for 6 months. Mrs. Henderson took the letters with 2 fingers as if they might contaminate her and read them with narrowed eyes. Finally, she nodded. $2 a week, paid in advance. No gentlemen callers. Breakfast is at 6, dinner at 7. If you are late, you do not eat." "Thank you," Beatrice said, counting out the money from her small purse. It left her with barely enough to last 2 weeks if she could not find work quickly. The room was small and sparse, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out onto the alley behind the building. Beatrice set down her carpetbag and sat on the edge of the bed, allowing herself one moment of uncertainty before she straightened her shoulders and began to unpack. She had not come this far to give up now. By the time she ventured out the next morning to look for work, the entire town seemed to know who she was and what she represented in their eyes. A woman who had abandoned her marriage vows. Never mind that her husband had beaten her so badly she had lost the hearing in her left ear, or that he had spent every cent they had on whiskey and card games. The fact of her divorce was all that mattered to these people, and it branded her as surely as if they had marked her with a hot iron. The proprietor of the dress shop looked at her with pity but shook his head. "I am sorry, Mrs. Morgan, but my wife would not approve of me hiring a woman in your position. It would not be good for business." The hotel dining room had no positions available. Neither did the laundry, though Beatrice could see through the window that they were clearly understaffed. Even the saloon owner, who she had approached in desperation, despite knowing what working there would mean, had turned her away with a laugh. "I need girls who will bring the men in, not drive them out. No offense, but you have got a reputation that would make the church ladies burn this place down if I hired you." By the 3rd day, Beatrice was beginning to feel the first real tendrils of fear creeping into her determination. She had enough money for 1 more week at the boarding house, and then what? She could not return to Sacramento, where her ex-husband still lived, and where his family had made it clear they blamed her for the dissolution of the marriage. She had no family of her own, her parents having died when she was 16. And she had used what little inheritance they had left to help her husband start a business that he had promptly run into the ground. She was sitting on a bench outside the telegraph office, trying to decide what to do next, when she noticed the man watching her from across the street. He was tall and lean, dressed in the practical clothes of a working cowboy, worn denim and a sun-faded shirt, with a hat that had seen better days pulled low over his eyes. When he realized she had seen him, He did not look away or try to pretend he had been doing something else. Instead, he touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect and crossed the street toward her. Beatrice tensed, ready to stand and leave if necessary. She had learned to be cautious around men, especially strange men in unfamiliar towns. "Madam," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I hope you will forgive the intrusion, but I could not help but notice you have been making the rounds of the businesses in town these past few days. Are you looking for work?" His voice was gentle, with the slow drawl of someone who had spent most of his life out on the range. His eyes, she noticed, were a warm brown, and they looked at her with something she had not seen in a long time: simple human kindness. "I am," she said carefully, "though I have not had much success." "I thought as much." He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. "My name is Jacob Kane. I work for the Double J Ranch, about 5 miles north of town. We are in need of someone to help with the cooking and general household work. The pay is not much, but it includes room and board, and the work is honest." Beatrice stared at him, searching his face for any sign of ulterior motive. "Why would you offer this to me? You must know what people are saying." "I know what they are saying," Jacob said quietly. "I also know that talk is cheap, and that most people are too quick to judge what they do not understand. My boss, Mr. Jeffries, he is a fair man. He does not care much for gossip. What he cares about is whether someone is willing to work hard and do an honest job. And you think I would be willing to work hard? I think any woman who keeps her head up while walking through a town that has already decided to hate her is someone with backbone. That is the kind of person we need at the ranch." Beatrice felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of tension she had been carrying for so long she had almost forgotten it was there. "When would I start?" "I am heading back this afternoon. You could come with me if you like, meet Mr. Jeffries and see the place. If it does not suit you, I will bring you back to town, no questions asked." She made her decision quickly, before she could second-guess herself. "Give me an hour to collect my things and settle my account at the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson seemed almost relieved to see her go, returning a portion of the week's rent without argument. Beatrice packed her carpetbag, changed into her sturdiest dress, and met Jacob in front of the general store where he had a wagon waiting. The ride out to the Double J Ranch gave her time to study him more carefully. He handled the horses with easy competence, his hands steady on the reins. He did not try to fill the silence with meaningless chatter, which she appreciated. Instead, he pointed out landmarks along the way: the creek where the ranch cattle came to drink, the stand of oak trees that marked the property line, the hills in the distance where the best grazing land was. "Have you worked at the Double J long?" she asked eventually. 5 years this fall. Started as a regular hand, working cattle and mending fences. Worked my way up to foreman about 2 years ago. That is quite an accomplishment," he shrugged. "Mr. Jeffries rewards hard work and loyalty. He gave me a chance when I needed one, same as I am trying to do for you now." "What kind of chance did you need?" Jacob was quiet for a moment, and she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I spent some time in prison when I was younger. Nothing violent, just stealing to survive when I did not know any better way. Did my time, came out determined to make something better of myself. Most people were not willing to look past what I had done, but Mr. Jeffries said he judged a man by who he was now, not who he had been. I have tried to live by that principle ever since." Beatrice felt a rush of gratitude toward this man she barely knew. "Thank you for telling me that. Figured you should know that I understand what it is like to be judged for your past." The ranch house came into view as they crested a small rise, a sprawling structure of weathered wood with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Beyond it, she could see the bunkhouse, the barn, the corrals where horses moved restlessly in the afternoon heat. It was not fancy, but it looked solid and well-maintained. Mr. Jeffries turned out to be a man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take her measure in seconds. He listened as Jacob explained the situation, then turned to Beatrice. "Can you cook for 15 hungry ranch hands?" "Yes, sir." "Can you do it 3 times a day every day without complaint?" "Yes, sir." "The work is hard. The men can be rough around the edges, though I will not tolerate any disrespect. You will have your own room in the main house, and you will be paid $15 a month. Does that suit you?" $15 was more than she had hoped for, especially with room and board included. "It suits me very well, Mr. Jeffries." "Then welcome to the Double J. Jacob will show you around and help you get settled. We eat at 6, so you had better get started on dinner." The kitchen was large and well-equipped, clearly designed to handle cooking for a crowd. There was a good supply of staples in the pantry, and Beatrice quickly took stock of what she had to work with. She had always been a competent cook, having learned from her mother, and she set to work with a sense of purpose she had not felt in months. Jacob stayed to help her carry water and showed her where things were kept. "The men are not used to having a woman around," he said as they worked. "Some of them might test you at first, see how you react. Do not let them push you around, but do not take offense at every rough word either. They mean no real harm, most of them." "I can handle myself," Beatrice said, rolling up her sleeves to mix biscuit dough. "I believe you can." When the hands came in for dinner that evening, there was a moment of surprise when they saw her, followed by a lot of elbow nudging and whispering. Beatrice ignored it and focused on serving the food. Beef stew with vegetables, fresh biscuits, and apple cobbler she had managed to throw together from what she found in the pantry. The men ate in relative silence, which she took as a good sign. When they started going back for seconds and thirds, she allowed herself a small smile. One of the younger hands, a boy who could not have been more than 19, lingered after the others had filed out. "That was mighty fine cooking, madam. Best we have had since old Cookie retired 6 months ago." "Thank you," Beatrice said, already starting to clean up. "Do not mind the others. They are just not sure what to make of you yet." After he left, Jacob came back in to help with the dishes. "You did not have to do that," Beatrice said, but she was grateful for the company. "I know. But it seems like a good chance to make sure everything went all right." The boy said Cookie retired. "Who has been doing the cooking?" "We have been taking turns, and let me tell you, it has been rough. Most of the hands can barely boil water without burning it. You are going to be a welcome change." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, washing and drying the endless stack of plates and utensils. Beatrice found herself relaxing in his presence in a way she had not expected. There was something solid and trustworthy about Jacob Kane, something that made her feel safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they finished up. "Of course." "Why did you help me, really? You could have just walked by like everyone else." Jacob dried the last plate and set it on the shelf before answering. "A few years back, I was in town trying to buy supplies when I saw a woman being berated by her husband right there on the street. He was calling her every name you can imagine, and she just stood there and took it, like she was used to it. Nobody did anything. Everybody just walked by like they did not see it happening. I have regretted not stepping in ever since. When I saw you sitting there, looking like the whole world had turned its back on you, I thought maybe this was my chance to do what I should have done before." "That is a good reason," Beatrice said softly. "Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I had a feeling you would be good at the job." Turns out I was right. Over the following weeks, Beatrice settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose before dawn to start breakfast, prepared hearty midday meals that the hands could eat quickly before heading back to work, and made dinners that were designed to satisfy men who had spent all day in the saddle or working with their hands. The work was demanding, but it was also satisfying in a way nothing else had been in a long time. The ranch hands gradually accepted her presence. A few of them remained distant, but most of them warmed up once they realized she was not going to pry into their lives or judge them for their rough manners. She learned their names and their preferences, who liked their coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in and who could not tolerate onions in their stew. Jacob became a constant presence in her days. He made a point of checking on her regularly, always with some excuse about needing to discuss the week's menu or report what supplies needed to be ordered from town. But Beatrice noticed the way his visits often extended beyond the immediate excuse, the way they would end up talking about everything and nothing while she needed bread or peeled potatoes. He told her about growing up in Texas, about the hard years after his parents died when he had fallen in with the wrong crowd and made the mistakes that had led to his time in prison. He told her about the moment he had decided to change his life, sitting in a cell and realizing that he was wasting the only life he would ever have. She found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, about the slow erosion of her marriage as her husband's drinking got worse, about the fear she had lived with every day, never knowing what would set him off, about the shame she had felt when she finally filed for divorce, as if she had been the one who had failed rather than the one who had been failed. "You did what you had to do to survive," Jacob said when she finished. "There is no shame in that. The rest of the world does not see it that way. The rest of the world does not matter. What matters is that you are here now, and you are safe, and you are building something new for yourself." It was during one of these conversations, late in the evening after the dinner dishes had been cleared and the ranch had settled into quiet, that Beatrice realized she was falling in love with him. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her breathless and slightly dizzy. She had sworn she would never let another man into her heart, never make herself that vulnerable again. But Jacob was nothing like her ex-husband. He was patient where the other man had been volatile, kind where he had been cruel, steady where he had been unpredictable. The knowledge terrified her. She tried to put some distance between them, keeping their conversations brief and sticking to purely practical topics. Jacob noticed. She could see the confusion and hurt in his eyes, but he respected her boundaries and did not push. The problem was that the distance made her miserable. She missed their long talks, missed the way he made her laugh, missed the quiet comfort of his presence. After 2 weeks of self-imposed isolation, she admitted defeat and allowed things to return to normal. If Jacob was relieved, he did not show it beyond a small smile when she asked him to stay for coffee after dinner one evening. As summer turned to fall, the work on the ranch intensified. The cattle needed to be moved to different pastures, fences needed to be repaired before winter, and there was the constant work of preparing for the colder months ahead. Jacob was often gone from sunrise to well past sunset, and Beatrice found herself watching for his return each evening with an anticipation that had nothing to do with discussing ranch business. One evening in late September, he came in later than usual, his face drawn with exhaustion. Beatrice had kept dinner warm for him, and she served him a plate without comment while he washed up. "Long day?" she asked, pouring him coffee. "One of the longest." "We had a section of fence go down on the north pasture, and half the herd decided to use it as an opportunity to explore the countryside. Took us hours to round them all up. You should eat and get some rest." "I will." He took a bite, then looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Beatrice, there is something I need to tell you, Her heart stuttered. "What is it?" "I am going to be heading into town tomorrow to pick up supplies and meet with some potential buyers. I was wondering if you might want to come along. You have been out here for 3 months now without a break. It might do you good to get away from the ranch for a day." "I do not know if that is a good idea. The way people in town feel about me. The way some people in town feel. But you should not have to hide yourself away because of small-minded gossip. Besides," he added, his voice softening, "I would like your company." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with all the things they had both been too cautious to say out loud. "All right," Beatrice said finally. "I will come with you." The trip to town the next day started well enough. Jacob handled the business at the general store while Beatrice browsed the small selection of fabrics, thinking about making herself a new dress now that she could afford the material. But as they were leaving the store, they nearly collided with a woman Beatrice recognized from her first days in Chico, one of the ones who had turned her back and whispered. The woman looked at Beatrice with open disdain, then transferred her gaze to Jacob. "Mr. Kane, I am surprised to see you keeping such company. I would have thought a man in your position would be more careful about his reputation." Jacob's expression went cold in a way Beatrice had never seen before. "Mrs. Patterson, I suggest you keep your opinions to yourself. Mrs. Morgan is a valued employee of the Double J Ranch, and she deserves your respect, not your censure. A divorced woman working alone among all those men. It is scandalous, and you know it. What is scandalous is the way you and others like you have treated a good woman who has done nothing wrong. Now, if you will excuse us, we have business to attend to." He took Beatrice's elbow gently and guided her away, but not before she saw the shock on Mrs. Patterson's face. "You did not have to do that," Beatrice said when they were out of earshot. "Yes, I did. I am tired of watching people treat you like you are less than human because of choices you made to protect yourself. You deserve better." They completed their errands in silence, but it was a charged silence, full of things that needed to be said, but that neither of them quite knew how to voice. It was not until they were on their way back to the ranch, the wagon loaded with supplies, that Jacob pulled the horses to a stop in a grove of trees beside the road. "Why are we stopping?" Beatrice asked. Jacob turned to face her, his expression serious. "Because I cannot go another day without saying this. Beatrice, I know you have been hurt, and I know you have every reason to be cautious, but I need you to know that I have feelings for you. Deep feelings. I think I have had them since the first day I saw you sitting on that bench, refusing to let the world break you down." Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. "Jacob, you do not have to say anything right now. I just needed you to know. Because every day I spend with you, I fall a little bit more in love with you, and it is getting harder to pretend otherwise. I am afraid," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am afraid of trusting someone again, afraid of being hurt again. I swore I would never let anyone have that kind of power over me. I understand that, and I would never ask you to give me power over you. What I am asking for is partnership, someone to walk beside you, not control you. Someone who sees your strength and admires it, who wants to help you build the life you want, not force you into the life they have decided you should have. What if I am too broken? What if I cannot be what you need?" Jacob reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "You are not broken, Beatrice. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. And as for what I need is you, exactly as you are." The tears came then, hot and unexpected. She had not allowed herself to cry in so long, had held everything inside in the name of survival. But here, with Jacob looking at her like she was something precious, the walls came down. He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself lean into his strength, let herself believe. just for a moment, that maybe it was possible to trust again, to love again, to hope again. "I care about you too," she said when she could speak again. "More than I thought I could care about anyone, but I need time, Jacob. I need to be sure. Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." They sat there in the wagon for a long while, holding each other as the afternoon sun filtered through the trees and the horses cropped grass by the roadside. When they finally continued on to the ranch, something fundamental had shifted between them. A door had opened that neither of them could close again. The ranch hands noticed the change, of course. Ranch life did not allow for much privacy, and the way Jacob looked at Beatrice, and the way she looked back, was not something that could be easily hidden. To her surprise, most of the men seemed pleased rather than judgmental. The young hand who had complimented her cooking that first night pulled her aside one evening. "Just wanted to say, madam, that we are all real happy for you and Jacob. He is a good man, maybe the best I have ever known, and you deserve someone like that." "Thank you," Beatrice said, touched by the sentiment. "And just so you know, if anyone from town tries to give you trouble about anything, well, you have got 15 ranch hands who would be happy to set them straight." The thought of her unlikely group of defenders made her smile for the rest of the evening. As fall deepened into winter, Beatrice and Jacob continued their careful courtship. He never pushed her for more than she was ready to give, content to build their relationship slowly and steadily. They took walks together in the evenings when the work was done, bundled against the cold as they talked about their hopes and dreams for the future. Jacob told her about his plan to eventually have his own ranch, a small operation where he could raise horses. "Not right away," he said. "I've got a lot to learn still, and I owe Mr. Jeffries for everything he has done for me. But someday I would like to build something of my own." "That sounds like a good dream," Beatrice said. "What about you? What do you dream about?" She had to think about that. For so long, her dreams had been limited to survival, to making it through one more day. "I dream about having a home," she said finally. "A real home where I feel safe and wanted, a place where I can put down roots and not worry about having to run again." "You have a home here for as long as you want it." "I know. But this is Mr. Jeffries' ranch, not mine. I am grateful for it, do not misunderstand me, but it is not the same as having something that truly belongs to you." Jacob nodded thoughtfully. "Then we will work toward that. Together, if you will have me." The "we" in that sentence made her heart skip. "I would like that." Winter brought new challenges. The weather turned bitter, and keeping the ranch running required constant effort from everyone. Beatrice found her days consumed with cooking hearty meals to keep the men fueled, washing and mending clothes that were constantly being worn and torn, and managing the 1,000 small tasks that kept a household running. But she also found joy in the work, in the satisfaction of doing a job well and being appreciated for it. The ranch hands praised her cooking constantly, and even Mr. Jeffries made a point of thanking her for her efforts. "You have made a real difference here," he told her one evening. "The men are happier and working better than they have in months. I made a good decision when I agreed to hire you." "Jacob is the one who suggested it," Beatrice said. "Jacob has always had good instincts about people. It is one of the reasons I made him foreman." Christmas came, and with it a surprise. The ranch hands had pooled their money to buy Beatrice a present, a beautiful shawl in deep blue wool that must have cost them a significant portion of their wages. She was so touched that she could barely speak as she thanked them. Jacob gave her a present too, a set of hair combs made from polished wood, simple but lovely. "I made them myself," he admitted. "I am not much of a craftsman, but I wanted to give you something personal." "They are beautiful," Beatrice said, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Thank you." She had made him a new shirt, working on it in the evenings when she had time. It was not fancy, but she had put care into every stitch, and the way his face lit up when he opened it told her that he understood the thought behind the gift. They spent Christmas evening together in the kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed, sharing coffee and slices of the cake she had made. The house was quiet except for the crackling of the fire in the stove, and the world outside was blanketed in fresh snow that glittered in the moonlight. "This is the best Christmas I have had in years," Jacob said. "Mine too," Beatrice agreed. "Last year at this time I was alone in a rented room in Sacramento trying to figure out how I was going to survive. I never imagined I would end up here. Are you glad you did? More than I can say." Jacob reached across the table and took her hand. "Beatrice, I know we have been taking things slow and I respect that, but I need you to know that I am serious about you, about us. When I think about my future, you are in it. You are the center of it." She squeezed his hand, her heart full. "I feel the same way. I am not afraid anymore, Jacob, or at least not as afraid as I was. You have shown me that not all men are like my ex-husband, that it is possible to trust again. I love you." It was the first time she had said the words out loud, and they hung in the air between them, precious and fragile. "I love you too," Jacob said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I thought I could love anyone." He stood and came around the table, drawing her to her feet. When he kissed her, it was gentle and reverent, a promise of all the things they could be to each other. Winter gave way to spring, and with the changing season came new possibilities. Mr. Jeffries called Jacob into his office one April morning, and when Jacob emerged an hour later, he was grinning from ear to ear. "What is it?" Beatrice asked when he found her in the garden, planting vegetables for the summer. "Mr. Jeffries has offered to sell me a section of land on the western edge of the property. Says it is too far out for him to manage properly anymore, but it would be perfect for someone starting out. There is good grazing, access to water, everything I would need to start my own operation." "Jacob, that is wonderful. There is more. He is willing to let me work off part of the cost by continuing as foreman for another 2 years. After that, the land would be mine free and clear." Beatrice threw her arms around him, not caring that her hands were covered in dirt. "I am so proud of you. It is because of you," he said, holding her close. "You made me believe that I could have more, that I deserved more. I never would have had the courage to ask him about it if you had not been here." "That is not true. You have always had the courage. You just needed to believe in yourself." Jacob pulled back just enough to look at her face, his expression turning serious. "Marry me, Beatrice. Help me build this dream. Make a home with me." She had known the question was coming, had felt it approaching like the spring after a long winter. And she realized that she was ready, truly ready to take this step. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." The preparations for the wedding were simple. They could not afford anything elaborate, and Beatrice had no desire for a large ceremony anyway. But Jacob insisted on doing it properly, on standing up in front of God and witnesses, and declaring their commitment to each other. The ceremony took place on a Sunday afternoon in May, in the small church in Chico. Beatrice had worried about how the townspeople would react, but Jacob had been firm. "This is our wedding, and we are not going to hide it away like we are ashamed. Anyone who has a problem with it can stay home." In the end, the church was surprisingly full. All the ranch hands came, of course, scrubbed clean and wearing their best clothes. Mr. Jeffries was there, beaming like a proud father. And to Beatrice's surprise, several of the townspeople showed up as well, including the young clerk from the general store and the owner of the hotel who had once refused to hire her. Even more surprising was the presence of Mrs. Patterson, the woman who had been so rude to Beatrice that day in town. She approached Beatrice before the ceremony, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize for the way I treated you," she said. "I have been thinking about what Mr. Kane said that day, and he was right. I had no business judging you when I knew nothing about your situation. I hope you can forgive me." "Of course," Beatrice said, meaning it. She had learned that holding on to anger only hurt herself. The ceremony itself was brief and beautiful. Beatrice wore a new dress she had made herself, pale yellow with lace at the collar and cuffs. Jacob wore his new shirt and a borrowed jacket that was slightly too tight in the shoulders. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor each other for as long as they both lived. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jacob kissed her with a tenderness that made her eyes sting with happy tears. The small congregation erupted in applause, and for the first time since her divorce, Beatrice felt like she belonged somewhere, like she was not just tolerated but celebrated. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed everyone twice over. The ranch hands had decorated the barn with wildflowers, and someone had brought a fiddle. As the sun set and the lanterns were lit, people began to dance. Jacob led Beatrice out for the first dance, holding her close as they swayed to the music. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," she said honestly. They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by friends and well-wishers, and when the party finally wound down and the guests began to drift away, Jacob took her hand and led her to the small cabin he had been building on their new land. It was not finished yet, just 2 rooms with a stone fireplace and windows that still needed glass, but he had made sure it was ready enough for their wedding night. He had spread blankets on the floor in front of the fireplace and built a fire that cast dancing shadows on the walls. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kane," he said, lifting her over the threshold. That night, as she lay in her husband's arms and listened to the sound of his heartbeat beneath her ear, Beatrice felt the last of her fear drain away. This was what she had been searching for all along, not just a place to live, but a person to love who loved her back, who saw her not as a scandal or a burden but as a partner and an equal. The next 2 years passed in a blur of hard work and quiet happiness. Jacob continued his duties as foreman for the Double J, while also working to improve their own land. Beatrice divided her time between cooking for the ranch hands and turning their cabin into a real home. She made curtains for the windows and braided rugs for the floor. She planted a garden and learned to preserve vegetables for the winter. She acquired chickens and convinced Jacob to let her have a milk cow. The land that Mr. Jeffries had sold them slowly transformed under their care. Jacob built fences and corrals, dug a well, and started acquiring horses to train and sell. Beatrice worked beside him whenever she could, learning about horses and ranching and discovering that she had a natural talent for gentling the more nervous animals. When the 2 years were up and Jacob's obligation to the Double J was fulfilled, Mr. Jeffries threw them a party to celebrate. "I am going to miss having you as foreman," he told Jacob, "but I am glad to see you starting out on your own. You have earned it." "I could not have done it without you giving me a chance," Jacob said, "and now you are giving someone else a chance. That is how it should work." Jacob had indeed hired a young hand to help with their growing operation. A boy from town who reminded him of himself at that age, eager to prove himself but lacking direction. Under Jacob's patient guidance, the boy was blossoming into a capable ranch hand. Beatrice threw herself into making their ranch a success. She kept the books, managed the household accounts, and even helped with the horse training. She discovered that she had a good eye for horseflesh and could often spot potential in an animal that others had dismissed. Their reputation grew. People began to seek out Kane horses, knowing they would be well trained and reliable. The ranch was not large, but it was prosperous and growing steadily. In the spring of their 3rd year of marriage, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complex mix of emotions. She was happy, of course, but also afraid. Her first pregnancy during her first marriage had ended in a miscarriage brought on by one of her husband's beatings. The loss had devastated her, and she had never tried again during that marriage, too afraid of what might happen. When she told Jacob, he held her close and promised her that he would do everything in his power to keep her and the baby safe. "This is different," he said. "You are safe here with me. Nothing bad is going to happen." The pregnancy progressed without complications. Beatrice continued to work as long as she could, though Jacob tried to convince her to rest more. "I am pregnant, not helpless," she told him, laughing at his worried expression. "I know, but I cannot help worrying. Then worry less and help me with these horses. This mare is not going to train herself." Their son was born on a crisp October morning, arriving with a strong set of lungs and a full head of dark hair. They named him James, after Jacob's father. Holding him for the first time, Beatrice felt a surge of love so powerful it almost frightened her. "He is perfect," Jacob said, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed at his son. "He is ours," Beatrice said, and that was all that mattered. Motherhood changed her in ways she had not anticipated. She had always been strong, had survived things that would have broken lesser people, but she discovered a new kind of strength in caring for this tiny, dependent life. She also discovered a fierce protectiveness that sometimes surprised her with its intensity. The ranch hands were completely besotted with the baby. They took turns carving toys for him and arguing over who got to hold him during dinner. Even the tough, weathered cowboys became gentle and careful in the presence of this new life. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Jacob's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout the region, and they had more business than they could handle. They hired additional help, carefully choosing people who shared their values and work ethic. Beatrice found herself becoming something of a pillar in the community, though it had happened so gradually she barely noticed. When one of the neighbor ranches had a crisis, it was Beatrice they called on to help organize meals and assistance. When a young woman in town found herself in a situation similar to what Beatrice had faced, it was to Beatrice that she came for advice and support. "You have done good here," Mr. Jeffries told her one day when he came to visit. He was older now, thinking about retirement, and he liked to check in on them periodically. "You have built something real, something that matters, and you have changed this town whether you realize it or not." "I do not know about that," Beatrice said. "I do. When you first came here, people judged you without knowing you, but you never let that make you bitter or small. You just kept being yourself, kept doing good work, kept showing kindness even to people who had not shown it to you. You taught this town a lesson about second chances and about not judging what we do not understand." His words stayed with her, and she realized he was right. The town that had once turned its back on her now welcomed her. She had friends here, people who valued her for who she was rather than for her past. It had not been easy and it had not been quick, but she had built a new life on her own terms. When James was 3, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This time the fear was less, though still present. Jacob was as protective as before, but he had learned to temper his worry with trust in her strength. Their daughter was born in the spring, a tiny thing with her mother's dark eyes and her father's smile. They named her Catherine, and if anything, the ranch hands were even more enchanted with her than they had been with James. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier than before but rich with meaning. Beatrice's days were full of children and horses, cooking and cleaning, managing the ranch accounts and helping Jacob with the endless work that running a successful operation required. It was not an easy life, but it was a good one, and she woke up each morning grateful for it. As the children grew, Beatrice and Jacob taught them about horses and ranching, about hard work and integrity, about treating people with respect regardless of what others might say about them. James showed his father's quiet competence and his mother's determination. Catherine was more impulsive, always ready to try something new, but with a kind heart that reminded Beatrice of Jacob. The years passed, marked by the changing of seasons and the growth of their family and ranch. There were challenges, of course. A hard winter that killed several head of cattle. A bout of illness that swept through the area. The inevitable conflicts that arose when people worked closely together. But through it all, Beatrice and Jacob faced things together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jacob took Beatrice on a ride out to the spot where he had first told her he loved her, the grove of trees beside the road to town. They left the children with Mr. Jeffries, who despite his advanced age still enjoyed spending time with them. "Do you remember this place?" Jacob asked as they dismounted. "Of course, this is where everything changed. I was so nervous that day. I had practiced what I was going to say about 100 times, and then when the moment came, half of it went right out of my head." Beatrice laughed. "You did just fine." They sat together in the grass, watching the afternoon sun filter through the trees just like it had all those years ago. "Are you happy?" Jacob asked. "Really happy? Because if there is anything you need, anything you want that you do not have, I want to know about it." "I am happy," Beatrice said without hesitation. "Sometimes I have to remind myself that this is really my life, that I really get to have all of this. It seems too good to be true. You deserve every bit of it. You deserve more. I have everything I need right here." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, until Jacob spoke again. "I have been thinking about expanding the ranch. There is a piece of property that borders ours to the south that is coming up for sale. If we bought it, we could double our grazing land and maybe start running some cattle along with the horses." "That sounds like a good plan. Can we afford it?" "I think so. Business has been good and we have been saving. It would be tight for a while, but I think we could make it work." "Then let's do it." They acquired the land and expanded their operation, just as they had planned. The work was intense, but they hired good people to help, and within a few years, the Kane Ranch was known throughout the region as a place where you could find quality horses and honest dealing. Beatrice found herself mentoring other women who came to the area, women who were fleeing bad situations or trying to start over after being judged by their communities. She offered them work when she could, or advice when she could not. She never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and she was determined to help others avoid that fate if possible. One of these women was a young divorcee named Sarah, who arrived in Chico in much the same circumstances as Beatrice had all those years ago. Beatrice hired her to help with the household work and the children, and over time, Sarah became like a younger sister to her. "I do not know how to thank you," Sarah said one evening as they worked together preparing dinner. "You have given me a chance when no one else would." "Someone did the same for me once," Beatrice said. "The way I see it, I am just passing it along." As the children entered their teenage years, Beatrice and Jacob began to think about the future of the ranch. James showed a real aptitude for the work and seemed eager to learn everything his father could teach him. Catherine was more interested in the business side of things, showing a head for numbers that impressed even Beatrice. "They are going to do well," Jacob said one evening as they watched the children working together to gentle a particularly skittish young horse. "We are raising them right. We are raising them together," Beatrice corrected. "That is what makes the difference." Mr. Jeffries passed away peacefully in his sleep when James was 15 and Catherine was 12. His death hit them hard, this man who had given them both so much. At the funeral, Beatrice and Jacob stood together with their children, honoring the man who had believed in second chances and taught them to do the same. In his will, Mr. Jeffries left them a small bequest and a letter. "You two took the chances I gave you and built something beautiful," he had written. "You proved that people deserve to be judged by who they are, not who others think they should be. Keep doing that. Keep being the kind of people who make the world a little bit better just by being in it." They framed the letter and hung it in the ranch house, a reminder of the values they wanted to live by and pass on to their children. As the years continued to pass, the Kane Ranch became more than just a business. It became a community hub, a place where people knew they would be welcomed regardless of their past or their circumstances. Beatrice and Jacob hosted gatherings and celebrations, helped neighbors in times of crisis, and quietly supported those who needed it. Their reputation spread far beyond their little corner of California. People came from all over to buy Kane horses, but also to see the ranch that was run on principles of fairness and second chances. Young couples just starting out would visit to ask advice. Women escaping difficult situations would seek refuge there. And always, Beatrice and Jacob welcomed them with open arms. When James turned 21, he married a girl from town, a sweet-natured young woman named Emma who fit into the family as if she had always been there. A year later, they welcomed Beatrice and Jacob's first grandchild, a boy they named after Mr. Jeffries. Catherine, at 19, showed no signs of settling down, too focused on learning every aspect of running the ranch to think about romance. "There is plenty of time for that," she told her mother. "Right now, I want to make sure I can run this place as well as you and Father do." "You already can," Beatrice told her honestly. "You are going to do wonderful things, Catherine. I am so proud of you." On a warm summer evening, as Beatrice and Jacob sat on the porch of their home watching the sun set over the land they had built together, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had been broken and judged, cast out by a society that valued propriety over truth. She had been poor and desperate, willing to take any chance that presented itself. And then, a cowboy had seen past the judgment and the scandal to the woman beneath, a woman who deserved respect and kindness and love. He had offered her a chance and she had taken it, and together they had built a life that exceeded anything she could have imagined in those dark days. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob asked, reaching over to take her hand. "Everything. Nothing. How lucky I am to be here with you." "I am the lucky one. We both are." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their family, James and Emma putting little Jeffries to bed, Catherine working on the ranch books, Sarah humming as she cleaned up from dinner. This was her life now. Not the life she had planned when she was young and naive, before she understood how cruel the world could be. But a life she had chosen, had fought for, had built with her own hands and the help of a good man who saw her worth when no one else would. "I love you," she said to Jacob, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them all those years ago. "I love you too," he replied, his voice warm with contentment. "Always have, always will." The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and celebrations, of hard work and quiet joys. The ranch grew and prospered. James and Emma had 3 more children, filling the house with noise and laughter. Catherine eventually fell in love with a young veterinarian who came to the ranch to treat a sick horse and stayed to court her. They married when she was 23, and he joined the family business, bringing new knowledge about animal health that improved their operation even further. Beatrice and Jacob grew older together, their hair turning gray but their love remaining as strong as ever. They slowed down a bit, letting the younger generation take over more of the daily operations, but they never stopped being involved in the ranch and the community they had helped build. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire town of Chico turned out to celebrate with them. The same people who had once judged Beatrice so harshly now honored her as one of their most respected citizens. She had served on the school board, helped establish a home for women in difficult situations, and quietly supported countless families and individuals over the years. During the celebration, the mayor stood to make a speech. 30 years ago, Beatrice Morgan came to our town with nothing but determination and dignity. Some of us, he said, and Beatrice saw him glance meaningfully at a few people in the crowd, did not treat her as we should have. But she never let that stop her from being who she was, a woman of integrity and compassion. Together with Jacob, she has built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of kindness and second chances that has made our entire community better. We are honored to call them neighbors and friends. The applause was thunderous, and Beatrice had to wipe tears from her eyes as Jacob stood and pulled her to her feet for a dance. They moved together across the floor, their steps familiar after so many years, surrounded by the love and respect of the community they had helped shape. "We did all right, didn't we?" Jacob said softly as they danced. "We did more than all right. We did amazing." As they grew older still, they spent more time on the porch, watching their grandchildren and eventually their great-grandchildren play in the yard. They told stories about the old days, about building the ranch from nothing, about the people who had helped them and the challenges they had overcome. "Tell us about when you first met," the grandchildren would beg, and Beatrice and Jacob would smile at each other before launching into the familiar tale. It never got old, this story of how a judged woman and a cowboy with a past had found each other and built something beautiful. Beatrice lived to see her great-great-grandchildren, tiny babies who represented the future of the family they had started. She lived to see the Kane Ranch become one of the most respected operations in all of California, known not just for quality horses, but for fair dealing and compassionate leadership. And when she finally passed, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82 with Jacob holding her hand, she did so knowing that she had lived a full and meaningful life. She had been judged and found wanting by society's standards, but she had proven that those standards were wrong. She had been broken but had rebuilt herself. She had been alone but had found partnership and love. Jacob followed her 6 months later, his heart simply giving out as he sat in their favorite spot under the trees. They buried him next to Beatrice on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, and the entire town came to pay their respects. The Kane Ranch continued under the management of their children and grandchildren, who maintained the values and principles that Beatrice and Jacob had established. The tradition of offering second chances and judging people by their character rather than their past became a fundamental part of the ranch's identity, passed down through the generations. Years later, a young historian writing about the development of California ranching in the late 1800s would come across the story of Beatrice and Jacob Kane. She would interview their descendants, read their letters and journals, and piece together the tale of a divorced woman who came to a small town with nothing and a cowboy who saw her worth when no one else would. "Their story is important," the historian would write, "not because they became wealthy or famous, but because they showed that true worth is measured not by society's approval, but by the content of one's character and the quality of one's actions." In a time when women had few options and second chances were rare, Beatrice Morgan Kane created her own opportunities and built a legacy that lasted for generations. And Jacob Kane, by choosing to see past judgment and scandal to the woman beneath, showed the kind of moral courage that truly changes communities. But all of that was in the future. For now, on that warm summer evening so many years ago when Beatrice and Jacob sat on their porch watching the sunset, they were simply two people who had found each other against the odds, who had built a life together through hard work and dedication, and who had proven that love and respect can triumph over judgment and scandal. They had shown that a person's past does not have to define their future, that second chances are not just possible but necessary, and that seeing the worth in another human being is one of the most powerful things one person can do for another. As the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, Beatrice leaned her head on Jacob's shoulder and felt the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his hand in hers, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. And that, in the end, was what mattered most. Not the judgment of strangers or the approval of society, but the love of a good man who had seen her for who she truly was and had chosen to stand beside her anyway. Together, they had built not just a ranch but a home, not just a business but a legacy, not just a life but a love story that would echo through the generations to come. The stars came out one by one overhead, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sound of horses moving in the pasture, the murmur of their families' voices inside the house, the gentle whisper of the wind through the grass. This was their world, the one they had created together from nothing more than hope and determination, and the courage to believe that they deserved something better. And every moment of struggle, every instance of judgment overcome, every challenge faced and conquered had been worth it to arrive at this perfect, peaceful evening where they could sit together and know that they had done well, that they had loved deeply, and that they had left the world a little bit better than they had found it.